Clerks 3 finds Kevin Smith going through some things, and like any member of Generation X in good standing, I can speak from some experience, that means we are all now going through it with him. Folks, as you follow the channel, you may know that one of the only things on here from my background archive that I've said will probably never be put back up on the channel is an old run of episodes going back through the films of Kevin Smith as part of the Big Picture series on the occasion of the run of Canadian horror films coming out, which I wasn't a fan of. The main reason for which, not that I don't stand by the reviews of the films themselves, the Canadian horror films that is, but the career retrospective piece, I think I got a lot of the career read wrong. I think I got a lot of the read of Smith as a person wrong at the time, and it's just not a very good piece of criticism. So I approach Clerks 3 as a film in the consideration that maybe you get this one wrong. Or at least that there will be further reconsideration down the line of this one as well, much like there has been of a lot of pretty much everything that he's done since the first Clerks, where everyone pretty much agreed, yes, it's a little on the shabby side, but this really has something to say. Mallrats came out, audiences, you know, eventually discovered it on video and it became pretty popular. Critics dismissed it out of hand right up front. Later on, people looked again at it and said, actually, this one's pretty good. Chasing Amy was supposed to be the mature, better one, and now is just dated as hell in its time. That's less its fault. Dogma, great movie, but also probably works more as a straight comedy than having anything really to say for itself. Not really the deepest religious satire in the world. It's more like a pretty good run of Adult Swim sketches about Catholicism, but funny. Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, very solid slapstick comedy. And then Clerks 2 is Clerks 2. It's, you know, a so-so raunch comedy with a very strong ending that probably at this point should have been the end of the Clerks cycle. He's built himself a podcast empire, a touring empire, has really turned out to be one of the stronger, more enduring presences of his own era as a figure in quote-unquote nerd media, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean at this point, which is a long way around to saying that Clerks 3 is... Just now realizing that I almost completely forgot to mention the other Jay and Silent Bob movie, which came out, which was mostly kind of an online theater event release sort of thing, which I thought was funny enough. Not as good as the first Jay and Silent Bob solo movie, but funny, yeah. Which is a kind of long way around to saying that Clerks 3, I'm not really sure feels particularly necessary, particularly funny, or particularly self-justifying piece of work, and that while there's nothing super wrong with it, and I certainly didn't dislike it, those are somewhat problematic when it is a movie that is mostly trying to be a comedy and all about self-justification. It's a film about its own reason to exist, and it never quite lands on what that reason is. Which is to say, it's basically a manifesto of purpose for something that he himself has stated multiple times over and over again, to the extent that there are multiple meta references in this to the fact that he pretty much already made this movie as Zack and Miri Make a Porno, and nobody really went to see that movie. It was actually pretty funny. I think that's one of his better things, but because that was the one that they made that was not itself a View Askew in continuity universe movie, it didn't really hit as big with his fan base or with general audiences. Kind of came out at the wrong time, like a Judd Apatow-alike that was not right at the point when that was kind of over. And so now he's basically done it again as a more directly connected, more maudlin thing that is also all about his recent issues, which will be very compelling and fascinating. Certainly grab by the heartstrings if you are a person of a certain age and can relate to it directly, which no shit I can. I'm exactly of the cohort that is just kind of fated to be overly connected to Kevin Smith and his movies. Like everything he does, a fascinating cultural document of the least fascinating generation to exist in the 20th century, our own. In any case, such to the plot. The premise in this one is that following the end of Clerks 2, I'll try to avoid the big spoilers for this one, of which there are at least two taking place prior to the movie and the end of the movie, both of which kind of feel, in my opinion, unnecessarily heavy-handed, but what else are you going to do with the material in order to keep this in exactly the place that it needs to be. Once again, much like with Clerks 2, trying to hold this universe in exactly the place that it is, when part of the reason that all of this is so nostalgic is that none of this exists anymore, is the difficult part of this. The idea now is that the titular clerks of the title, Dante and Randall, have been continuing their quick stop lives since the end of Clerks 2 without much change, mirroring Kevin Smith's own experience with a massive heart attack recently in real life. Randall manages to have himself a heart attack in the first act of the movie. Releasing from the hospital, decides that he is feeling that he has never done anything with his life, having been encouraged by doctors to indulge him in whatever they feel will get him back on his feet. His friends, chiefly Dante, decide to basically humor his dreams of finally making a film on his own. Inevitably, he decides to make the movie Clerks, is the meta hook of this one. And yes, you can pull up the old tweets on Twitter where I said that the only way to make a Clerks 3 at this point is to have them make a movie in the store and have that turn out to be the first Clerks. You know, I was joking at the time that that would, you know, be clever, but I was mostly pointing out that that's the plot of Zack and Miri, which it is, and it is here again. It's a clever idea, and I think it would have been a clever idea, a more clever idea, just been Clerks 2 instead of Clerks 2 taking that detour into being in the fast food industry. I think part of where the problem comes in here is that this either could have been a meta movie about the making of Clerks, or it could have been a movie about men of our generation approaching 50, dealing with their lives, and the two things don't necessarily go together, because what's inherent to the first Clerks is that it is a scrappy, angry, young person's movie, not a bitter, nostalgic, maudlin old person's movie. So in this one, the contradiction that you're dealing with is what exactly is driving a person like Randall, who is the least introspective person possible, to make a deliberately retro wave art house movie about his friend and himself working in a store in the 90s instead of literally anything else. It's fun to see them do the recreations and make the jokes about filmmaking hack ways that they did the first Clerks, but also it mostly skips over the issues of, well, why would they be doing any of this business now when the technical side of indie filmmaking has basically jumped past all of this? The way that they've chosen to get around it, or the way that they've managed to get around it, or elected to get around it in the first place, is that it's not really about the making of that. It's about Randall grappling with mortality, Dante grappling with mortality, which ultimately leads up to where it's leading up to, which certainly moving. I'm not entirely sure that this franchise has ever been exactly as, I'm sure it's meaningful to the people making it. I'm not 1000% sure that the material has ever lent itself to wrapping up in the way that all of the Clerks movies wrap up. Characters stating the theme and then going out on a think about it sort of note. I'm not really sure it's ever been that. And the thing about this is it always feels bad to be even a little bit overly critical of Kevin Smith's movies in this respect, because eventually he's going to make a dozen documentary features and go on tour about this and talk about the making of it and be very open about not getting it exactly the way that he wanted it to be. And the fact of the matter is, Kevin Smith, as a chronicler of the culture around his own material and other people's material, and as a podcaster and as a raconteur of his generation and of the mediums that have inspired him, has always been a much stronger presence than Kevin Smith the actor or Kevin Smith the filmmaker. One of the things that the live performances during which he had the heart episode consistently proved is that Kevin Smith, the stand-up orator, is so much stronger than the guy who cast himself as a character who never speaks and just mugs at the camera. The upside of things is that it is not an overreach of a thing. It's not too many cameos. There's not too many meta jokes. There's not too much business in it. And if you're basically watching this to join in with a generationally important filmmaker who, whatever else you can say about him, has certainly earned the right at this point to make a movie literally sucking his own dick, that's a reference. The fact of the matter is, we are apparently heading into an entire long season of big directors making movies about movies and movie making that are semi-autobiographical. Sam Mendes has Empire of Light coming, Steven Spielberg has The Fabelmans, Damien Chazelle has Babylon, which is about old Hollywood. So it looks like if we're not going to leave the superhero cycle, we are just going to also have a co-cycle of movies about movies by directors who love movies. And so far, even though this one might not be great at being about Kevin Smith summarizing his life, about an entire generation of filmmakers like Kevin Smith, about what it was to make films in the 90s, since it's not a period piece, it is very good at being only about, and it's not too self-indulgent to the degree that something that is wholly self-indulgent can be, if that makes any sense whatsoever. And I'd be lying if I said that the sad parts are not actually moving. And I'm not one of those critics who is going to not rate a movie a little bit higher if the aesthetics don't work, but the emotional stuff does, because that is actually the most important part, if the movie is trying to, in fact, tell an emotional narrative. So I will generously say that Clerks 3, I will give this one a 6 out of 10. I don't know that it totally works. It's certainly unnecessary, but then what is? When it comes to you, it is worth a look. If you're my age, you are probably going to watch it anyway. And as ever, Kevin, I look forward to what you do next. I'm glad you're still with us, man.